So I've been thinking about all this just a little bit more now in light of what happened this evening, this gay encounter that I had with this guy who came over. And the more I think about it now, the more what seems wrong with it is, I think I've hit upon it, it's the sheer austerity of what was going on. It was really lacking in passion, in any kind of, it was dispassionate, disinterested almost, going through the motions, a robotic encounter. I wouldn't have enjoyed such an encounter with a woman. I don't think it makes any difference that it was a man I was having this encounter with. But on all levels, it was a pretty disappointing sort of first encounter with a man, I think. And no offense to the guy, or maybe I do actually, yeah, like think that there's a little bit of offense there, since he was there for one thing and one thing only, and that was sex, and it was pared down and austere, and it was we invoke a horribly offensive term here, as it was Protestant sex or Protestant gay sex. It was like with a sex life and passion and romance. It's like I think in certain people's mind these create blocks or categories, or like this is sex and it's divided from love. It's not part of an integrated whole in some people's thinking, I don't think. Like, there is sex, then there's love, then there's this, then there's that. So, well, it's like there is life, within life there's love, within love there's sex. It's more like it's nested, more like, isn't it? It's, and you get, although you know what, like, Protestant sex is, the old missionary position, probably in their pajamas, or like through a sheet or something. Oh God! It's like, if this is what society's done to it, done to us. I've been reflecting on this more and more now, and I think our generation, or my generation, is, in a very bizarre sense, a very odd sense actually, quite prudish, quite buttoned up, quite austere, really quite actually Victorian, more than anything. And like, it's regressive. We should be, free and open people in the freest and most open society in the world. One of the freest and most open societies in the world, going around, yes, having sex with one another in this marvelous age in which technology has allowed us to be able to do that in the form of condoms and this sort of stuff. And like, that is as though in Britain at least, like, sex used to happen. It did used to happen. I think it used to happen more often. Like, I've read, like, young people nowadays, they are having less sex. People in my generation are having less sex with one another. It's a dreadful shame. And I know what's caused it. I know it is Tory austerity, or it's austerity. It's the doctrine of austerity handed down by, in this country at least, the Conservative government. I'm pretty certain. Because I'm trying to think when sex was ending, roughly. And roughly when I think it was ending, I think it must have been about 2012 or 2013. That's the last time I had sex. And I'm tempted to say, like, I'm not a bad looking guy. I'm quite pleasant to be around. I think I managed to have sex before then. It sort of stands to reason, I think, that I ought to be having more sex following that. But then again, what I've read, or from the reading I've done, turns out not many people have been having sex in our generation. So, by the way, this is a well-documented sociological phenomenon. Women become less promiscuous in times of austerity. You've got the old skirt length raising and decreasing in line with times of austerity. And I remember being a kid, and I used to spend quite a lot of time in the pub as a kid, because my father's an alcoholic. So So I'd be going down the pub as a kid and sort of interacting with, well, grown-ups and sort of young grown-ups, if you know what I mean, and frankly older ones as well, and having conversations with them all the time. And so yeah, and they would be having it away with one another, and they'd be interacting socially with one another, trying to chat one another up and so on and so forth. None of that happens now. It seems like all hooking up that's done is carried out over mobile apps and dating sites and this sort of thing. And this is how it's conducted now. And there's such a poverty in it. There's such a, and by the way, all these dating apps, these emerged really at around about the same sort of time, around about this 2010-ish time. And but then dating sites, we've had those forever, and dating agencies had those for even longer. That's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like the phenomena of hooking up with people, i.e., casual sex and what used to be called a one-night stand, happening sort of via mobile apps, and it's degraded the quality of one-night stands to such a point now where like this gentleman, you know, will come into my home and expect just sex, and has had sex with probably someone else the same evening, and like what is he seeing himself as, like some sort of service provider? Is that the mentality there? Is he like doing a good public service by having sex with men who want to have sex with him, or is it like he's just robotically and mechanically going through the motions of having sex? What is the fucking point? I don't get it. No, it's like, I swear this is what happens when you go Protestant and you start putting substance over style. Then you end up with this sort of thing. You end up with sexual austerity. I say, what is the substance of sex? What is a biological process? You know, it's like it forms part of our needs as a human organism, and we need to release that sort of sexual energy at various points. But you lose everything in the process. You lose everything that's stylistic about it, and yeah, you do lose all the surface elements which are enjoyable. And like in a sense, everything's lost if you pare it down to just, you know, you know, you know, it's just like an orgasm. Like you're trying to use another person to harvest an orgasm, what, for yourself? Like that, it lacks flavor. You know, it lacks like verve. It's just the sort of the most brutal, almost. You know, you fall into this mode of being where there's a poverty to it, and then fucking needn't be either. Like all it takes is just like half an hour of more of someone's time, and yeah, again, like in a more Catholic sense, to take your time with it and to actually enjoy it, rather than just strip it down to its basics and rob it of its subtlety and its nuance, rob it of delight and charm and everything else, and all this stuff. Like, how do we delight and charm one another? Very much with our style. You know, no one is charmed or delighted by your moral center. Like, no one gives a fuck about your fucking moral compass or whatever, or your code of ethics. Not in like the sexual sphere anyway, or not frankly in the sphere of most human social interaction, we hope your ethics are on point. But really, what's more interesting about other people when we try to get to know them is, how they come across superficially. And this is what we actually get interested in. And it must not be forced. It must be sort of fluid and organic. And from this, we sort of estimate in other people's minds that they have good character. And largely, we're not interested, I don't think, so much in just going straight to fucking. And they said, as I understand it, this is what hookup culture is largely like now. And I can imagine, like, what with women as well, is that you go, like, hook up with a woman, they come around yours, or you go around theirs, and we're like, come in then, let's do it. Fuck off then. All right. That's it. That can't be it. That's horrible. I don't want anything to fucking do with it. And I think, I'm pretty certain this phenomena has occurred concurrently with the phenomena of rising austerity in the West. And, like, what will turn the tide on it? I don't know. Another massive boom of some description. Or a raising of the standards of living for most people. Massive wealth redistribution. I don't know what could bring it about. Like, more of a togetherness and community spirit. Is that what could help this? But I mean, like, romance is dead. That's the other thing people say often. Oh, romance is dead. Fuck romance. That we don't. Right. We're just interested in sex now. Sex. And we don't want to write poetry for other people. We don't want to compose songs for other people anymore. Nothing like that. And we'll just get down to sex straight away. Sex. But, like, in the process of doing that, like, that process has now sort of reached its logical terminus, which is that actually people aren't all that interested in sex now, it seems. And they're not interested in the jollity and gaiety of sex. And, like, what this impulse towards austerity seems to be doing, or seems to be trying to achieve, is robbing us of sexiness more than anything else, and robbing us of, well, like, genuine interest in sex, I think, and the ability to do sex well. So, and it's either a case of people are being fed far too much porn, or not enough. I don't know, or like what happened to the days when people would, like, engage in, I don't know, or maybe it's always been like this. I don't know. I swear it hasn't. People now, like, having less of it because the sex we have is fucking disappointing. And like, one disappointment with it too many. Like, well, I'm gonna give up forever. Fuck it. Like, I can't be bothered to go looking for it. I'm not that interested in it anymore. Yeah. We have never had, in any period of history, a greater degree of opportunity to be sexual and to express ourselves sexually. So this period of history we're living in is unprecedented. It's like, really, like, we should not be engaging in down to business, chop, devoid of passion, devoid of, subtlety and charm and everything else, sex. we should be getting very creative with it, shouldn't we? And then like, when were people getting really creative with sex? Like in the 60s, really, weren't they? Among hippies. That's when they're doing all like the weird shit and the tantra and all this sort of thing. And like, when were the bondage booms of like recent history going on? Like the 80s, I think, wasn't it? And then the 90s. And of course, that had antecedents in obviously the Victorian era and slightly before then, I think. And yeah, it's like, and this phenomena of my generation seemingly being like really rather buttoned up. Yeah, it's a dreadful shame. It's almost as though they don't appreciate what has gone before, and they don't appreciate the real freedoms we have now. Like, everyone should be fucking all the time. Surely there should be a massive fuck party, but it's not. It's a hookup culture invested vapid fuckhole. As I said in one of the comments, like, I mean, is it porn that's done it to us? Porn, you said, like, porn is just videos of people fucking. If, like, surely you should watch porn, like, to sort of try and understand how to do good sex. That should be part of its function, no? And, like, something like the bondage videos, like, you still get sort of porn with a story, right? And that's supposed to sort of teach you how to seduce someone. But like, those were never very good, let's face it. And or the acting was terrible. But and yeah, I mean, we want the roller coaster ride of seducing someone or being seduced, don't we? We play out these narratives in our minds, or maybe I'm alone in this even, where sort of, we find a certain guy or girl who gives us particular feelings, and that we sort of imagine what may happen with them. Why don't we do that even anymore? I just know, like, there are people out there who may be very good at seduction, and like maybe good looking and good at seducing people, and they are just going from fuck to fuck to fuck to fuck, aren't they? And is it them ruining everything for the rest of us? And yeah, they are like the hookup people. And it's a wider problem with the culture, because people don't go out anymore, not really, and like, this is time of COVID as well, which makes it all fucking worse, obviously. And everyone's into it. Everyone's just living their lives through the internet, like, constantly addicted to social media, addicted to the online world. Like, can't face ordinary human social interaction. And I'm no exception. I've been as poisoned by it as anyone else. But yeah, I mean, it it infuses and certain forms of, let's say, ideology certain strains of ideology, because this is exhibited all over the planet, is by no means a Protestant Catholic phenomena, and the Protestant Catholic sort of system I'm using to try and define this phenomena is just a useful rule of thumb, I think, or a convenient set of labels to put upon these phenomena. Because on the one hand, there is the phenomena that seeks austerity and seeks to, like, rob people of any kind of sexual gratification and pleasure. So masturbation is a sin and all this stuff. And of course, certain, and by the way, Protestant strains of Christianity will jump upon, and by the way, the Catholics do it as well, I think. So it's not really a Christianity thing so much as like the whole of Christianity does it. Will jump on the anti-masturbation bandwagon or something like this and say, "Thou shalt not wank." And it's like, oh, for goodness sake, leave us alone, will you? I grant you, if you're doing it 15 times a day and you're like giving yourself lesions or something on your cock, like, I'd probably pack it in for a week or two and then, like, ration your wanking a bit. Like that, and it's always bunk about it. Like, for instance, the no fap movement. Have you heard about this bullshit they have now? And this is coming out of the secular West as well. That's coming out of the online world. It all starts on Reddit, And I'm just, as a quick side note, I'm continually amazed by people, the appetite of people out there for bullshit and nonsense. It's almost as though you have to spin bullshit to get ahead in the world. The truth isn't good enough. Because the truth is plain boring and uninteresting. People don't want people telling the truth. Not now. They want bullshit. They want lovely, warm, like, comforting bullshit. Or horrible, austere bullshit that's trying to frighten you into doing something pointless, like stopping wanking. And yet it's coming out of secularists and atheists, really. No fap. Like, you are just conforming to a stereotype of certain stricter forms of religion. And, like, well, there it is in your own fucking movement, and you're just as bad as they are. And sorry, it's like, no, it's not a religion, it's based on unbelief, not belief. It's like, yeah, well, you believe something you believe that something doesn't exist, hence that is a belief, hence it's a system of belief, hence an ideology at the minimum, and so on. You're creating, like, something which is, well, an austere ideology then. And I'm a pantheist, which means, like, yeah, I do take pleasure in, like, messing about with tarot cards and things like this, and messing about with the I Ching, and yeah, have a healthy respect for the ancient religious traditions of the world, and so on and so forth. And I don't have the poverty and austerity of atheism. And, it is to be poor of spirit and to value this sort of stuff and to pare everything away. And atheism, in character at least, for this reason, is very Protestant. Its character is Calvinistic. And, like, no fap, I can't fucking believe it. There is a difference between enjoying a good old-fashioned wank and being, like, a sex addict or a sexual deviant, if you know what I mean. And then you will get people who are so buttoned up and prudish that they would consider, like, any amount of, like, pleasuring oneself to be sexual deviants almost. And, like, heap scorn upon you for being deviant because you masturbate. I was like, you are, but if you think like that, like, you're probably tainted with some form of religion, or toxic ideology, and you are the lowest of the fucking low. You dirty, proselytizing, puritanical in spirit little scumbags. And like this is what, again, substance over style leads you into if you don't treat it with the utmost fucking care. This sort of way of thinking, putting your morals before everything else. That really what you start beating people over the head with it, and you don't even know you're doing it half the time, and it's so irritating, and it gets people's backs up, makes people afraid. Like these substance over style people, like they really, I think, cause a lot of problems in the world. I think they cause most of the problems in the world. Like, no, consider style more important. Be style over substance. Because like, what's the worst that can happen if you're style over substance? You can be a vain douchebag. If you're not careful with that. And a vain douchebag's irritating, yeah. I don't think they're exactly dangerous, though. I don't think they're a social ill as such. You do with fewer of them. But, I mean, it is what it is, I mean, they're annoying to look at, if a man is too vain or whatever. But I think they're pretty fucking harmless. I think real harm comes about in a more palpable way when you got a group of people saying we're the moral superiors in society and you ought to do as we fucking tell you, and we're going to beat you over the head with our morality. I think that's more dangerous. And it's the waggle of the finger, isn't it, famously? Or like put a bit of fear in them, waggle the fingers, say no, 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 thou shalt not, get them all afraid, and then like they're easy to manipulate, aren't they? And manipulate. Oh, and by the way, possibly give us some money as well. Then there's that in the mix. Like, we have a system to radically improve your life, but it involves in part not masturbating. And by the way, the church or the program or whatever it is, we could do with some money, or we'll put you on a course. That's a big one, isn't it? And the course costs money, of course, and all this sort of thing. Or there's a book involved, or it's something, and there's lucre at the heart of it very often. Dirty currency, and that's the real objective. And or it's something like snake oil, like the whiff of snake oil about it, which NoFap certainly does, and it's pseudoscience. It's all nonsense. It's been like widely criticized by serious doctors, neuroscientists, and psychologists. Is there any benefit to not masturbating? You've got the average doctor saying like, if you do too much masturbation, you can hurt yourself. Yes. But you will gain a swollen penis if you do too much of it. Masturbation will become rather painful, and you won't be able to do much more of it for a bit until the swelling goes down, obviously. That is masturbation harmful? No, it's fine. And for instance, and like if you rob us of the wank, like it would not do, would it? For this attitude which seems to pervade in people. And I think in terms of origins of this attitude, Eastern culture and this is an interesting point, I think, is as much to blame as Western culture. You've got the classic old forces of Christianity or the Judeo-Christian traditions, I should say, or the Abrahamic faiths operating in the West and the East. You've got all that still, but you've got this other thing, which is very strange, of the Far Eastern traditions coming in also and generating austerity. And people don't really think about this so much because people think, oh, New Age spiritualism and Buddhism and Hinduism, all this stuff. This is very, very cool, very, very interesting. But when you sort of start unpicking that a bit more, you get into traditions like Zen and like very strict discipline and all this sort of stuff which we know about the Eastern traditions anyway, or the Far Eastern traditions. So yeah, like again, religion, I just know it's rearing its ugly head in and amongst all this stuff, and it's bamboozling people and tricking people. And they got like no fat, which is a bizarre phenomena, which in terms of the tradition of the ideas behind it has much more in common with sort of the archetypes of Christian thought, and much more in common with, yeah, very repressive, more often than not Calvinistic, puritanical strains of Christian thinking. And like somehow it's come out of the secularist tradition or the secular end of society. And you know, it's like well, secularism and atheism is now infected with bollocks, bullshit. How do we rid this of its little like bit of cancer in it? This tumor of rubbish. We'll have to do a bit of fucking surgery quickly on the atheism to whip out the rubbish. You know, I was disappointed by tonight. I was expecting like a lovely gentleman to come over, because you know all the gay guys I've met in my life, all of them, those are men I would happily invite warmly into my home, like for sex. Yeah, I think very possibly, you know, or at least for a cup of tea, and then we'll see what happens. You know, this guy wasn't interested in a cup of tea; he was just after sex, which, yeah, it's symptomatic of hookup culture, and it's sort of, it seems to be like a rule of the game that I wasn't quite aware of, or part of like the modern etiquette. Like, or like you have now the phenomenon of the dick pic. Guys just photobombing pics of their dick. Well, not photobombing, but like just smashing out there a dick pic. Oh, look at that. That's what I'm packing. And I'm like, yeah, that looks good. Like, where's the soul in it? Like, on another level, like men are not also only callous monsters who are just interested in like action movies. You know what I mean? Like certain men like also like rom-coms. I love rom-coms. I'd happily watch rom-coms with you. You know, and this is also how we learn about women, I think. Well, it's how I learn about women. It's how I learned about them. Try to, you know, study their habits and their behavior, learn about their culture, learn about their interests and so on by watching, well, my favorite rom-com is, of course, Bridget Jones's Diary. All three of them are fantastic, though The third one is the weakest. The second one could be stronger than the first one, and it's a sort of Star Wars effect with it, whereby A New Hope is very good, Empire Strikes Back is the best one, and Return of the Jedi is the weakest one. Yeah. Is the second one better than the first? Ooh. You know what? I enjoyed, because I listened to the audiobook of The Edge of Reason, and I have to say I did enjoy it more than the first film, listening to the audiobook. Because there's all sorts of things, like Bridget goes to prison, Bridget does mushroom. All sorts of things happen in it, and yeah, it's fantastic. I love Bridget. I love Bridget. Oh, I love Bridget so much. I just want to cuddle her and kiss her and tell her that everything's going to be okay in the world, and just see her like a lovely, smiley little face. And I find her sexy, no matter how fat she gets. Renee Zellweger is Bridget, beautiful Renee Zellweger, doing the absolute best British woman accent or British accent I've ever heard an American actress do, ever. That's the best British accent I've ever heard an American manage. And she was brilliant in that film. Fantastic. Brilliantly cast. That was a feat of brilliant acting, I thought. But yeah, so like, and there's other phenomena annexed to this in this age of austerity since let's say about 2010 onwards, where you've got these sort of feminazi types supposedly getting all sort of rabid and shouty about like the patriarchy and the wage gap and this, that, and the other. And it was reactionary movement of the alt-right, Proud Boy types, etc., and sort of incels and anti-feminazi people on in the sort of male spectrum of the sort of new weird brands of conservatism that are coming to predominate in the world. Whereas if you go talk to most women, they're like, wow, I don't really like notice much of that shit going on. And like the radical spheres among women, or probably the strictly feminist spheres among women, amount to like a minority among women. And then there are radicals among them, who probably account for like 2% of women, if you see what I mean. So it's something like the case that all or most women are getting tarred with the feminazi brush, or sort of being tarred in a sense, or in a presumptive sense, by men with the feminazi brush. Think, oh, they all just hate all men, and and whereas like obviously nothing could be further from the truth, because like most like men, for instance, don't give a fuck about like men's issues at all, whatever that is. Just get on with their fucking lives, try to get laid as often as possible. And yeah, and like and all that has taken off as well. Like this clash of like the so-called culture war that has its sort of its great thinkers like Jordan Peterson out there making mountains out of molehills, when really there's like fuck all in the world that it is really going to shit, and we're just living through austere times. And I think in a sense we needn't be, not really. Because, well, I know why it is. It's because back in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher had the exquisite idea of deregulating the property market, as I understand it, or the stock market, more like. and you have these massive bubbles emerging within trading stocks and things like that, and sort of the deregulated mortgage market and things like this, and subprime borrowing that eventually started to sort of crumble around the early to mid 2000s, and you have the 2008 financial crisis as a result of that, ultimately, and then sort of austerity, so cutbacks on public spending and so on, to bail out bankers, and we're all aware of like the scumbaggery inherent in the process that went on then. And bankers got bigger bonuses than ever and all this sort of stuff, and everyone was sickened by it at the time. For whatever fucked up reason, people continue, or they persist in voting Tory, or they vote for Donald Trump in America. Because all the this anti-feminazi bullshit is taken off on the alt-right spectrum, and they could never possibly vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a woman, basically, or because she's evil for some reason. And they dig up joke emails that got sent to her, apparently oh, I'm going to cook a child or something and sacrifice it to Cthulhu, which is obviously, I think, meant in jest. No. But everyone in politics is so fucking po-faced. And no prime ministers have sneaky little parties, do they? Or booze Fridays or whatever it is. In the old Boris castle that is number 10 Downing Street during a time of pandemic, season of plague, COVID land, and all this stuff. So in the midst of all this, a strange prudishness has wormed its way into society, and a strange veneration of the austere. And you can be as lefty liberal as you like, in a sense, the lefty of the liberal type, or the lefty of the type. It seems very often the more and more they seem to have been hoodwinked by it, and they're the worst affected, and they're probably the ones having the lower amounts of sex, and they probably ends up becoming the most prudish, which ultimately means they're being at least socially conservative. But, very ironic, all this sort of stuff, isn't it? It's my analysis of it, anyway. The people who are otherwise on the right wing or right of centre or whatever it is, they probably are engaging more in casual sex still, for the sake of keeping up a tradition, or what has become a tradition. And the so-called progressive movement that's saying that, all right, we need to push back against something. We need to push back against something in society. Let's think. Oh, too much sex is happening. Yeah. There was too much having a way with it of one another in society. We should put an end to that. That is so fucking unoriginal, though. That has been going on since, that's been going on. Fuck me. It's been going on since the Middle Ages, I reckon. Or at least since the 16th century or so. When the old, the faintly scary figure of the Puritan began emerging in Europe. The old, buckle on his hat and buckle around his belt on his waist, or buckles on his shoes, all shiny, done up. tapping on his Bible, no, or her Bible. Or if it's a her, the bonnets and the long dresses and a waggly of the finger. Well, most Europeans are sort of being like quite a bit more drunken and lecherous and engaging in hanky-panky. And not, post-marital puritanical hanky-panky in pajamas and bed sheets, but in the nud. Start bollocks naked, fondling tits or cock or whatever it is. And, having a good time. Because that's ultimately what sex is for. Is about fun. It's not about like the mere mechanics of it. It's not like it's meant to be reduced in people's minds to a mere biological process. There's such a poverty in that way of thinking. What about scampering down the hallway after your coquettish lover to ravish, well, not ravish, but to undress her and like roll about joyfully in one another's arms and all this sort of stuff, or to be tender and gentle and to look into one another's eyes in the glimmer of the firelight and so on, and to engage in soft and gentle, wonderful sex. That is what we want, and all that stuff is stylistic. Like, in a sense, because it's style. Like, style is something that can have a real depth to it, and a lot of people don't understand that. And on this level, I suppose style is substance, or the style is the substance. I feel like I'm like Marshall McLuhan or someone trying to say that the medium is the message. And that might not actually be a disconnected idea, like quite so much. Well, I suppose it is really, but whatever. Style is substance when it comes to sex. Otherwise, what is substance? Well, we're down to like pure and vain morality, and the application of moral thinking to this sphere of metaphysics or ethics. And like and there is, I'm afraid to say, on the feminist front, this obsession with sexual ethics. And this rape culture notion, which is just, I have no idea where it's come from. Like, we live in a rape culture. Like, do people seriously believe that? Like, what, we live in a culture that endorses rape? I don't think that's ever been the truth. I really don't. Like, rapists exist, unfortunately, but they are among a tiny minority among men, as I understand it. That it is thankfully relatively uncommon. That, or I don't know what their point was exactly, or is it far more common than it, or so much of it goes unreported and so on. I don't know, but yeah, it's like it is not remotely the case that most men are rapists, and it's all this sort of stuff that the alt-right types and so on, the incel types fixate upon in their narratives against feminazism, or frankly against feminism. And it's the cooperation of these two seemingly opposed forces that pits probably quite large proportions actually of the sexes against one another in a pretty routine fashion, and leads and generates this austere element of prudishness and the renunciation of sexuality in life. And it, yeah, is a dreadful shame. And and the truth in in the face of all that, in the face of all this rhetoric and furore, truth seems to lose relevance to some extent because people are already so ideologically committed to their positions. So you see thinkers on both sides assembling and marshalling different statistics and different studies in their mind to sort of serve their own narrative ends or to serve their own ideological purpose, or seeking to uphold an ideological position on the basis of whatever evidence they've managed to cobble together in their minds from different sources, and end up talking cross purposes with their opposition at, yeah, and you get these sort of seemingly like rather pointless debates from the likes of Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson on Channel 4, and where you can't figure out which of them you despise the most. Like, do you hate her for was it Kathy Newman or whoever it is, that woman from Channel 4, and it's like you can't figure out which of them to hate the most. Yeah, she is jumping down his throat, but he's probably about like the worst representative of male culture you could hope to find. And yeah. And a big advocate of a very austere way of living, frankly, it seems. It's all this like tidy your room stuff, be orderly, which he equates with conscientiousness erroneously. Be orderly, be buttoned up, be all this, have your walk with a straight back, with your shoulders back and all this, make yourself look dominating and intimidating. Like, look at how the likes of Einstein or Richard Feynman carried themselves in life. Richard Feynman was a bit of a hippie, wasn't he? He was always fucking slouching or sitting on something. Like, look at Einstein's desk. It's not so fucking orderly now, is it? Interestingly, they preserved his desk at Princeton. You can look at it online. You can look at it in real life. Like, there wasn't a order. Wasn't really the order of the day in that working environment. Now, was it? So like, oh, there's a wrinkle there, isn't it, with a very creative, great and brilliant thinker. So yeah, and again, I'm putting substance over style, it would seem, but crucially the moral element of substance, which when it comes to substance, I think is a very fundamental thing, isn't it? And we enter into, well, guess what, fundamentalist thinking. If morality is like the thing that needs to be harmonized or perfected within someone, and that you should really investigate your moral core because of superficial aspects of how you behave or come across, that, well, I don't know so much about that. It's like, do what most people do. Most people's morality is just fine. That's the thing about it. When it really comes down to morals and ethics, like, most people are good. Like, and if you've done bad things in life, you might have some soul searching to do and a bit of thinking, and like to go through some sort of process of self improvement, I guess. But I think that's more the exception than it is the rule. No. But what I see evaporating, certainly in British culture, and I've seen this certainly since 2016. 2016 was probably when it started getting really real, but it had antecedents before then. And it was very much fun just was starting to drift away from the world, or drift away from our bit of the world, and like leaving not like not merely our sex lives, but our entire lives somewhat impoverished spiritually. And on this level, like actually Russell Brand is pretty much on point. And we do need like some sort of large spiritual awakening. We do need a coming together. We do need, more excuse for festivities and parties and large social gatherings where we can have quality time and possibly also get laid at the end of it. And well, I could see this happening before my eyes as well, because I worked in the pub trade from 2011 until about 2018. So you could see this in the quality of like fun that was happening around the place. You could see it starting to ebb and just lose something gradually, gradually, gradually. And going out at that sort of time as well. And like as you notice, I think at some point fewer conversations are breaking out between different people at social events and gatherings, and it's more and more like taking place online, and more of this hookup culture, and everything just becomes more insular and more repressed and repressive. Because the sort of poverty of and we all know what this is so far as it pertains to hookup culture. You swipe through on Tinder, just judging people on photos of them. If you, like, some people aren't photogenic, let's face it, but they might be delightful. You just don't know that. Is it on the basis of purely on the basis of looks? That's how you're judging them. Like, what do women think as they go through? Like, oh no, don't like the look of him, don't like the look of him, don't like the look of him, or he looks like a serial killer or something, and meh. And all that sort of shit started happening over that period of time. Like, imagine that so and so looks like a serial killer. How can you look like a serial killer? There have been some pretty good looking actually serial killers. Wasn't Ted Bundy quite good looking? And also like some serial killers are actually like quite charming people. Oddly also, like Charles Manson managed to sort of ensnare quite a lot of people with their charm and their charisma. So like you can have some charismatic evil people as well. That is sort of kind of the problem with it almost, because then like almost the way of charm itself becomes something that's suspect. But then of course on the flip side of that, you do have like deeply uncharismatic serial killers. That's the other truth of it. Who are like the lone weirdo and like more, let's say, the stereotype. So like or like that sort of mentality is utterly baseless, because it manages to be wrong on two fronts at the same time. Like you got a sort of lone winner, they're acting like a serial killer or something. Like, well, no, they're probably just like an oddball who's a bit lonely. You like strike up a conversation with one, they might be really funny or something, or really like delightful in some way. But I'm like, but well, you didn't really give that person much of a chance. And that's what hookup culture does. That's what Tinder does. There's like, we can't give you a chance, or you give people like a microsecond or something, and that's your chance to impress someone. And I'm one of these people, I can't take a good photo of myself to save my life. And I don't think like that there don't exist too many great photos of me out there. But then like I have off days with my looks as well, because I video myself doing these videos when my camera's working properly in this sort of light. And I find like in some videos I do look a bit odd looking, yeah, and in other videos I look fine. I don't know what it is exactly. I think it's like, I don't know what side of my face I was sleeping on the previous evening. Makes my face look a bit funny looking from time to time, but surely is it not also like a personality thing? And then women are like, yeah, it is, but it doesn't go both ways though. But men are only interested in looks. Like, that is not strictly true either. Like, I've known loads of good-looking women who I don't find bearable at all. Or like, yeah, well, and loads of I don't want to go into all that and like unpack though. Yeah, maybe we deserve it. Maybe like it's the result or the consequence. Let's say less gentlemanly types among men doing things like grading women out of 10 and grading them like cattle. I happen to know actually that cattle get graded out of 3, not out of 10. So we're actually fairer to cattle than we are to women. we give cattle like a smaller like range of numbers in which to like, not be on point in what's known as body condition scoring. But that's like God. Yeah, so we might deserve it as men, frankly. But then again, like, how much do I deserve it personally? Why should I have to suffer for other men's like, rudeness and lack of sensitivity? I don't know. I don't know. Right. Like, what does a categorical imperative impel me to think? If we're to focus on any like moral like position on this, I don't know. I don't think anything of that. Like what actions ought to I adopt for it to become a universal moral law? I don't think I actually have to throw my hat in the mail ring on that, because guess what? None of the rest of them would do it for me. And like the 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 categorical imperative on that level, well, actually, it states the opposite of that, like that we must somehow reproduce and further the species continue. Actually, does it? Because we're overpopulated now as a species. So shouldn't we be working towards gradually reducing the population? And maybe, just maybe, this is something that this austerity in terms of our sex lives. This is something that's arisen so very organically, possibly from a collective consciousness of things like environmental issues and the impact that our very large human populations are having on the planet, and we are hence having less sex. Since the less sex we have, that obviously reduces the likelihood of children occurring, and we need to ideally limit those as much as we can. So yeah, I mean, a repudiation at least of straight sex might be beneficial to the overall collective, and hence there's a sort of meme whirling around either the collective unconscious or the collective consciousness that is sort of inspiring people to propagate this notion that we ought to be having it away less. But then again, I'm thinking we do live in a society now where sex is incredibly safe by comparison to earlier times. And that I see fewer reasons, frankly, why hanky-panky may not persist and keep occurring. I'm also thinking of the things like, exactly how much time do we need to devote to austerity to put us back in a better position, or into a more harmonious position with our environment? And can we continue having, as we seem to have had in the past, with these varying levels of austerity, this sort of boom and bust economics when it comes to sex? Periods of high promiscuity, periods of low promiscuity, and so on. The skirt length sort of going up and down the leg, increasing and decreasing, fluctuating, if you like. Is that like a healthy sex economy? And if not, like, should it be perhaps more ordered, and so everyone gets their fair share somehow, but it's like done by a government department, or sort of matchmaking service. It's done at random, even maybe. So like 1 week, your little share of nookie could be with someone like very attractive. The next week you will get put with someone who's a little less fortunate in the looks department, shall we say. That might not be such a bad system, actually, I reckon. And I've thought of this before, like, have it like fucking on Wednesdays or sex Wednesdays. It's all run by the government. You've got like an app on your phone to see who you get this week. You've got to get with them, otherwise you get a fine or something. Like, what would the fine be? Just enough to make sure you do it. 150 quid. More than a parking ticket, less than speeding. Or you have a sex license, and you get points on your license for not doing it. I don't know. Because the thing about free market economics, which is what we have in the sex economy at the moment, is that it is a tempestuous mistress, isn't it? It's a cruel, cruel thing. Some people do incredibly well out of it, and in a sense ruin it for everyone else. Like, the one person listening to this is now stopped listening to it. And yeah, it can be fucking cruel. It's really cruel. It's insanely cruel. I'm lucky. I've had sex. I've lost my virginity. Lost my virginity at 19. I've had my bit of sex. Trying to get more of it now. Tried tonight with a gay guy. Very disappointed with it. It's not what I wanted, I think. As I said before, I don't think I'm going to write off men on the basis of that one experience. But yeah, something needs to give, I think. I'm going to try again, see how it goes again. If it doesn't work out again, then can I trust a sample size of 2? If it was just that, I want to eliminate the possibility if it was just that one guy who was at fault. And like, if another one sort of does the exact same thing, I think I'll then start to think it's actually a problem with sort of gay hookup culture. But like, then the real problem would be with hookup culture itself, which is actually more like what I think I probably suspect, if you see what I mean. You know. But yeah, like the poverty of it, the austerity of it, it it can't persist. Something needs to give, and I think like I hope anyway that the market that's out there for wonderful, edgy, beautiful sex between either men and women or men and men, or for that matter, women and women as well, has not perished from the earth. Like Lincoln said, with government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But, yeah, we I think need to see sex more, not as something segmented from the rest of life, but as something that's integrated within the love life, you know, and that there isn't such a thing as one's sex life versus one's love life, but the two are intimately linked. Culture is just the reduction of the possibility of frivolity and romance between two people to such an extreme of spiritual poverty and austerity that it turns sex into something actually deeply unsexy and rather ugly and a little repugnant. And unsatisfying. Like, ultimately, I think everyone just wants to have fun with one another, and that this includes hanky panky and having it away and so on. Because why not? It's a fun way to pass your time, isn't it? That way, and that's it really. And that there is no way to have sex morally. Morality, yeah, well, it is important, I suppose. It must be integrated. Like, sex must, of course, be fucking moral, obviously. It must not be immoral, but most people, most of the time, almost all the time, are perfectly aware of that. And are perfectly aware of like the role of morality in sex. But we must somehow learn how to transcend those sorts of considerations in favor of just having fun with one another, because too much moral overthinking in relation to something like sex just ruins sex. And actually, I suspect that's the reason why most people's sex lives end up getting ruined. Because of a level of confusion when it comes to moral considerations. Or not a level of confusion necessarily, but a sort of cognitive dissonance that occurs between people on the sort of levels of things like morals and sexual etiquette, that where they're not quite on the same page with one another, and just ends up spoiling the whole thing. It's like bit of it, like discussing. It's like having a political discussion, with the family over Christmas dinner, isn't it? Political discussions are almost always involve morality to some extent, obviously. So it's like that. Like, yeah, you fucking opened your mouth and said something politico, didn't you? And beat us over the head with your superior morality and your superior fucking intellect or politics or whatever it is. Like, no, not here, not now, not at Christmas. Come on. You might as well just like shat a big old wet turd on the table. Curled one out onto the turkey. Like, like, because you can do that at any other Sunday lunch, can't you? Yes, you can. In fact, we welcome it, that bit of like sparring over politics, over a chicken at Sunday lunch. That's not a sacred time anymore. No one gives a fuck about that. That's just the Sabbath. But yeah, like Christmas, nah, you can't do it then. You can't talk politics over Christmas dinner. It's not right. It's not good. It's not wholesome. Like I don't think we have this quite so much anymore. I think, ironically enough, maybe we do need to bring back more things like sacred days. You know what I mean? And times of festivity. I think we've been gradually losing this sort of thing. I think we've actually been losing it because of Christianity. Ironically enough, since I happen to know back in like Roman times had various periods of festivity throughout the year, and you had Saturnalia around Christmas time, which instead of just like Christmas Day and Boxing Day and Christmas Eve and so on, you'd have 2 weeks. And drinking and dancing and all this sort of stuff. Ancient Roman pagan festival honoring the agricultural god Saturn. Saturnalia celebrations of this is all devil worship, by the way, because Saturn, Satan, right? Just like Zeus, Deus, like those words are linked. I'm pretty certain of it. Or is Saturn like a pretty fucking terrifying god, frankly? The god of time and agriculture. And yeah, like Saturnalia would be debauched, as I understand it. Oh. And they'd have all sorts of other festivals throughout the year. And you used to have sort of have this in Christian society as well, like Harvest Festival and things like that, which I sort of remember still happening back when I was at primary school. But then everyone stopped observing that for some reason. All these sort of like older traditions sort of like fade into the past a bit. And again, opportunities for merrymaking, drunkenness, and having it away. And like Christmas, like frankly, is become quite Calvinistic. I tend to think, and is so commercial, which is like such a ironically Protestant element of it. I think like when they do Christmas on the continent, still, it's quite a bit less commercialized and quite a bit more wholesome somehow. It's like, it's this element of frugality within Protestant thinking, isn't it? You know, the penny pinching prod. You know what I mean? It's it's this obsession with money. You know, the bitter irony of which it produces things like consumerism. People can't stop spending the fucking stuff. Like spend and accumulate, spend and accumulate. That's what we devote our entire lives to if we carry it onto its logical conclusion. And yeah, it lends itself very much to a deeply austere way of living, where human connection and jollity, jolliness and gaiety is robbed from the equation by the 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 baseless desire for accumulation of resources. And, delay gratification. What take that to its conclusion? Like, how to what extent do you delay gratification? Maybe I won't like quite slip into hedonistic thinking, but you have to try and find a middle way between these two different poles of the ascetic and the hedonist, don't we? Yeah, you can't delay gratification indefinitely. Otherwise you end up as the the very wealthy city executive without really a sex life, and at some point without even a sex drive anymore. Who hates his wife, hates his kids, is bitter about the hollow feeling he has from his success, so called. Has put all his money in very expensive artworks that he keeps in a vault or something and never looks at. And of every um, possibility for uh, frivolity and excitement and possibly affectation even, and a bit of like stylistic stuff going on, or stuff more associated with style, has sort of withered in his heart, and obviously he's missed out really on what he was chasing in the first place. Has probably already realised that he could have that with less money, a lot less money than what he probably has. But it does come down to things like being a bit more spontaneous in life, or something as simple as going out to a bar alone and trying to talk to people. Or chasing some grander dream than the mere accumulation of money. If you sincerely believe money is the most important thing in life, well, in a sense, you'll only ever be poor. And you'll be poor no matter how much money you have. You sort of lost the ability to appreciate the subtler joys of life, which come about in the appreciation of things like art, poetry, um, other people, and all that good stuff. Which is good stuff. Really. So yeah, I mean, you must learn not to live without the subtleties and spontaneities of life. Learn not to be ascetic, but not hedonist either necessarily. Well, yeah, Frank, I think hedonism is probably a wiser path, very possibly, than asceticism. I think asceticism is probably the worst path, and is of course the most impoverished path in all respects. And hedonism, but there are limits to that. Like I'd say no doing heroin, for instance. But drinking a bit here and there, so long as it's with people, I think. And having a good fucking time while you're alive, ultimately. And having fun in life. And we must have fun in life. That is crucial. And, all these anti-fun thinkers, and there's so many of them out there now, it seems, both on the left and on the right, or on what they believe is the left. Adherents of Calvinist austerity, each and every one of them. And I do mean Jordan Peterson, but I also mean that woman he was arguing against. Waggling the finger, beating him over the head with her morality, him doing the same back to her. It's fucking tiring to watch. They're watching two arseholes in a pissing contest. Neither can really compete, if you see what I mean. Neither, an arsehole wouldn't be much use in a pissing contest, obviously. Is that quite what I mean? Yeah, I think it is. But, sort of both doing, not doing what they're meant to. Like watching cricketers play tennis. You don't really care who wins. You don't want to watch it in the first place. It's on for comic relief or something. That's what it feels like. Anyway, I've spoken enough about this, I think, and prattled on long enough for now. I will love you and leave you, and I will go to bed because it's my days off. Although I might not, actually. I might stay up for a bit. Yeah, thank you everyone for listening to whatever this has been. And I will possibly talk to you again soon if I can be asked to do so. Thank you very much.